Hey, dear friends, welcome back to another episode of the Artisans of the Horizon. We get to explore yet again another avenue of what it means to be a person who paints, sculpts, thinks, imagines, feels the world that is beyond the world that's right in front of our nose. And today we get to do that exploration and that fun, that play with our friend Deborah Eden Tull, who is the author of of Luminous Darkness, this book here. And we are going to explore it, all the concepts of it, or most of the concepts, and ultimately have fun in the process because fun is revolutionary and playful. As you have heard me share before on this series and in other videos, St. Thomas Aquinas talks a lot about fun and playfulness are necessary components of the spiritual life. And so we want to cultivate that as often as we can in these conversations. So I'm going to pass the mic to you, Eden, to share your how you describe yourself to the world and how you show up, and then we will get into our conversation.
Sure. And first, I want to just appreciate your emphasis on the horizon, the imagination, fun, and play. These are such vital components of the spiritual path. And when we don't have fun and consciously access our imagination and our playful animal bodies, we forget who we really are. We tend to take ourselves much too seriously for transformation and growth, which are imaginative and creative processes. Yeah. So I'll share that I'm talking with you here from the luscious mountains of Western North Carolina, bright with autumn colors right now. I'm a meditation teacher, a Dharma teacher. I run a nonprofit called Mindful Living Revolution. I have been, I think, on the path my whole life and practicing Buddhist meditation for 30 plus years, and feel that the natural world and the living matrix of life is our greatest teacher. And so part of my intention in writing Luminous Darkness was turning towards darkness of the night and darkness in consciousness, both consciousness and nature, as the benevolent spiritual teacher that it is, that it's been understood by so many wisdom traditions across the globe as, and yet that's gotten lost the more we're finding ourselves here as modern humans who take ourselves quite seriously and live in this brightly lit, obsessed with artificial lights world, and who often try to approach the spiritual path as a path of transcendence, trying to get to the light through great effort and push away the dark. And I'm inviting people into something more and something different. There's much more I could say about myself and my path, but I'll pause there. Yeah.
Beautiful. You've already elucidated, which is a funny word given that it's the root is light. But you've already, shown and revealed that the the depth of what it means to have this reality of darkness. I'm very conscious of the fact, one of the reasons why, or two of the reasons why I was so intrigued by the book, and um, definitely would be a book that if I saw it in the bookstore and I saw the title, I immediately would grab it. Because A, the title is really attractive and thought provoking, but also the two main reasons why I really enjoyed the book was I enjoyed the fact that it came from an engaged Buddhist perspective. I practice Zen meditation, particularly within the Thich Nhat Hanh school of meditation, and I have a deep love for Thai. I was absolutely devastated when he transitioned, but that's part of the cycle of life. He continues on in all of us. And so that was the one reason. But the other reason was too, as a Native person, I am hyper conscious of the reality that within our sacred teachings, we have always known that darkness was a very sacred relative of ours. And that darkness, in the teachings of the medicine wheel, the direction of the north is associated with darkness in winter, a time in the cycle of creation when darkness enfolds us and we begin to realize that we need to dedicate this time to stillness, to listening. That direction is also associated with the elders who are wisdom keepers, and making time to sit with elders to learn the healing medicine that they have. Um, Along those lines, I really want to have hear your thoughts on darkness as a way of being an opportunity for challenging fear and sadness, maybe even some grief, and explore this really revolutionary idea that I think that you have created of endarkenment, treating darkness as an opportunity, as an initiation into a more deeper way of being. So, can you speak a little bit more to that?
Thank you. Yeah. And I love what you shared and want to first just thank you for presencing Ty, and just felt a wave of love in my heart. And I'm sure so many listeners, and because he impacted so many of us, there's so many different pathways, felt that wave of love when you presenced him. So thank you. And for me, I want to first just name, and you put this in your own words, there are so many spiritual traditions that have long recognized that everything carries a consciousness, and that darkness carries a consciousness. And in the dominant paradigm, the modern world, we tend to have a very limited definition of darkness. In the Merriam-Webster dictionary, it literally defines darkness as the absence of light. And so we consider darkness the absence of light, this thing that is important, while darkness is not. And so many missteps and delusions come from that basic misunderstanding of darkness. And as you named, just from your own tradition, the recognition of darkness and of stillness, slowing down, silence, winter, the fallow aspect of nature, the receptive, as I talk about it often in the book, the yin aspect of nature, as being such a vital guide in the spiritual path, in everyone's spiritual pathway. And so it doesn't serve us to hold a notion that, oh yeah, that's all good, but we're really trying to get to the light. We're really trying to get away from the dark. And when we slow down and listen, for me, there's a chapter in the book about the Twilight Temple, that place we each come to, perhaps physically, a community or an actual temple in our lives, or an internal place as well that we access through our practice, that finally offers the paradigm of a field that is all welcoming, a field of spacious presence, the consciousness itself, which welcomes every emotion, which welcomes every human experience, which has space for all of it, the light and the dark, which does not see the light as divine and the dark as to run away from. So we get to, in that slowed down, spacious presence, hold with compassion the fearful one, while we embrace all of these aspects of human consciousness and of life that we may have been conditioned to turn away from, conditioned to other, to reject. And one more piece I'll add to that is that that conditioning affirms a whole approach to life of, instead of learning how to meet the unknown with openness, respect, how to meet the mystery with love, with reverence, so many people have been taught to meet the unknown, that which we can't see or understand or fit into our conditioned box, with absolute fear and rejection, and this habit of labeling. So we can try to understand. Let's try to label and categorize life and go deeper into our rational minds and the mind of limitation, which, by the way, folks, got us into this whole human conundrum we're now facing collectively. Yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And you know, one of the things that I find very interesting about the play of dark and light is that, you know, when the sun hits us, the first byproduct of that, of when we stand in the sun, is a shadow is created. So this idea that we can have either darkness or light is actually a false binary, and it's this training of our brains into thinking in a dualistic way. I am conscious of the fact that my people were traditionally sun worshippers. On my beadwork, you can't really tell in this video, but on my beadwork, it has the colors of the sunset. Um, because those are sacred to us as sun worshippers. And but one of the things that we know about our creation story in my tradition is that um, the sacred beings, whether you want to call them deities or whatever, were actually created from darkness. They came from the sacred being of darkness, and so including the primary being of the sun. The sun comes from the darkness, and so it's this flipping over of the this idea that light is the primary source of life. Um, and I oftentimes in pastoral counseling remind people that, you know, there are two places that we as human beings come from darkness, the womb and the tomb. Um, you know, those are both places of darkness. And both of them, in their own way, help to initiate us into different planes of existence. And so really challenging, I think that's one of your great fruits of your book, is that it really challenges this dualistic idea that we have light and then we have darkness, and we need to always choose the light. Yeah.
Yes, yes, there's so much I appreciate in what you shared, but the book begins with a quote by Mircea Eliade, which says, "All of light arises from darkness." And we can go further. All creativity, all insight, all vision, all possibility arises from darkness. The darkness, again, from which all of us came, as you named, the womb and the tomb, and to which all of us return. The darkness, which is this field of liminality, as you're naming, which helps us to transition, to grow, to alchemize.
Yes.
And it's so interesting because you mentioned the phrase sun worshiping, and we love the sun. We can all touch in with through our own life experiences and traditions, our love of the sun. But when we're coming from an anthropocentric perspective, which is so popular in today's world, right?
Mhm.
There's a lack of seeing the cycles and full spectrum of nature and life, and instead seeing this versus that. And so seeing, again, light and dark as separate rather than acknowledging that each morning as we wake up into the dawn, this dawn has come from the dark of night and will feed the bright of day, and this will feed the dusk, and this will feed the night again. And it's all one sacred cycle. And likewise within ourselves, we can find metaphorically the dusk, the dawn. So if
Mhm.
we're othering half of it, pushing away half of it, and only wanting to own half of it, we're really missing out on the invitation for wholeness and also recognizing the sacred interplay, which we're talking about here. You with me?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, one of the things too that I think COVID has taught us is that we cannot live in a world that avoids or pushes out the darkness. It will find a way to us. And oftentimes, darkness is equated to pain and fear and uncertainty, when there could be some level of truth to that in depending on how we are relating to darkness. But also too, those can be moments of learning to see darkness as an opportunity for healing and as an opportunity for establishing bravery. You know, one of the things that is interesting about rites of passage is that there's a certain level of risk to them. There's a certain level of adventure, but also danger to them. And learning to interplay with those two realities of adventure and danger, of risk and challenge, are crucial to understanding a more holistic, but even a more meaningful way of living. And so, how in the process of writing this book, how do you feel like you were challenged to take a risk in exploring an avenue of darkness that maybe you avoided or didn't realize that you were avoiding?
Great question. And I love the topic of courage. I agree with you that spiritual practice and simply being human, if we're honest, invites us to venture out beyond our comfort zone. Uh, the path of truth invites us to venture out beyond our comfort zone. And darkness is certainly an invitation to experience the unknown beyond habit and comfort. For me, this book was quite a journey and a beautiful journey. It aligned very synchronistically, where, really began a couple years before the pandemic that I felt the seed of this book emerging. You know, those experiences of a deep spiritual calling, and at first maybe resisted a little bit, like, I have a lot of other things going on in life. You want me to focus on this now? This is a big teaching, but it brought so much together for me in terms of my path and this whole offering of the need for endarkenment alongside enlightenment. And as I share more, I'll just name that I've become a really courageous being in my life. And one of the reasons I have is because I've had so much fear. And I've been living a path for years of not pushing away the fear, not judging the fear, but holding in compassion the fearful one while I take the stand of stepping forward in courage. So there's always a tendril of courage we can feel within, even in the face of fear. And that's one of the teachings of this book. For me, this book really bridges the personal, interpersonal, transpersonal, mystical, ecological, many threads. And it was an edgy book for me to write. So I've written 2 books prior, and both required courage in their own way. But still, anytime you are saying what has not been said before, anytime you're sharing, and I always share transparently as I do in this book, from the depths of your own experience and your own vulnerability, anytime you're making an offering to a larger community, to the public, there's an edge to it. There's an edginess. As part of my path, because my core practice is Zen Buddhism, and I talk about this in the book, there was a period where I was becoming more present to some of the limitations and constraints the culture Buddhism had created. We're going to talk about these things, but not these things. We're going to still maintain a subtle divide between body and spirit, or sex and spirit. We're going to still quietly accept some of the patriarchal conditioning that has been passed down by a lineage that has primarily come through male monasticism. And I touch on all of those topics in this book, every single one of them. Primarily, a major theme is the need for us to make a shift from power over dynamics, and especially in spiritual communities, to power with. So yeah, it took some courage, some chutzpah, to write this book, and I felt beautifully supported. And anyone who can touch in to your own personal experience of stepping out in courage when there's also fear, you know what a beautiful process it is. Book aside, meaning final product aside, it's just a beautiful process to say yes to expanding our expression. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so glad you named the justice element to this reality, in that um, we have to the part of living a courageous life isn't just about self-actualization, but it's the reality that we are not individuals, we are collective realities. Even in our own beingness, we are the byproduct of our parents, our grandparents, their grandparents and parents, and thousands of people are embodied within us. So we are a collective reality. Not to mention, we comprise within our being all of the elements. We are a byproduct of creator and creation. We are light and shadow. We are activity and inactivity. We are not a binary reality. We are a both and more. And so the justice element is key, I think, for our 21st century and postmodern world, in understanding that we have to face and confront courageously all those things that deny and segment all of the fullness of who we are. My friend, the Reverend Dr. Matthew Fox, likes to talk about justice for today is sustainability. And I agree with him. I think justice and sustainability are crucial. But I would extend it even further, and I would say that justice equals sustainability and integration, because we have to bring all of ourselves and all of creation together in a commingling reality in order for us to be sustained and to practice a more, hmm, what's the word, a more fruitful way of living. And also, too, along that line around justice, for me, I've often equated darkness with pain. And that's partly because of my lived experience. I was born with a genetic birth defect that ultimately caused a brain disorder to develop, and which causes me to be very familiar with the relative of pain and how to manage that. And um, I oftentimes joke with people. I say I should invoice people who trigger me and cause me to be in pain because it is a full-time job to manage all of that, and I should get paid for it. But this question of pain in relation to darkness, because I think for a lot of us, darkness triggers these ideas of pain. Um, and I know for me, a great example is that at nighttime, I'm a visually impaired person. So at nighttime, it's a little challenging to be in existence because you cannot perceive things as much as you can during the daytime. Doesn't mean that you can't, because science tells us that when we're in darkness, our eyes adjust to the small particles of light that are still present. So this idea of darkness is the absence of light is actually very scientifically inaccurate.
Yes.
Um, so can you speak a little bit to this idea of darkness triggering this perception of pain? How has that unfolded in your life?
Sure. First, I want to just revisit something you shared around sustainability and justice, and thank you for presencing those topics together. And just to tie this in with pain, that the more we become attuned, sensitive, open, as a lived meditation practice opens us to feeling and being fully present with, sensing the inner and outer landscapes, the more we recognize that there is no separation, that we are not separate selves, and the more we recognize that we're part of the natural feedback system of planet Earth. And as you named, the ancestral realm, deep time, everything that has happened to all of humanity since before the beginning of beginningless time, that we are part of the natural feedback system of something much greater. And so if there is grief that's coming through us to be felt, this is on behalf of the collective. If there is a recognition of the outrage, the fiery burning feeling within that comes when we witness injustice, this is not to be pushed aside or judged as a negative emotion I don't want to feel. This is something we can consciously turn towards on behalf of our collective. And so we often label things that are unwanted, uncomfortable, or that we consider bad, negative, sinister as dark. But on one level, darkness simply means the unknown, the unfamiliar, that which is a teacher that has yet to teach us, that which we have yet to embrace and integrate, like shadow, which ironically, certainly on my life path, find that everything that I once labeled shadow and therefore was unwanted, or I should do something about, maybe meditation will help me get rid of this, became instead an incredible alchemical source of energy through integrating, through welcoming, through including this too, rather than pushing it away. So I always find it interesting that shadow can become such a fiercely loving source of renewed energy and expression through ourselves. My life, I grew up in the city of Los Angeles, and I talk in the book about how even though I grew up in a family of artists and activists, people deeply engaged in service and social justice work specifically, that was an incredible gift as a young person, because it both showed what's possible when humans get together and roll up their sleeves and choose to live of service, but also it's also continual heartbreak, seeing the challenges of bureaucracy and the systemic injustice and all of that. But I call LA a culture of sunshining that I really picked up as a young person who also navigated my own grief and loss, losing loved ones at a young age. It just showed me that, oh, the dominant paradigm is not set up to embrace, to welcome, or to recognize the wisdom of this full spectrum of what we experience. I should really learn to push down or hide my grief. I should really try to keep it light or cheer up. I should focus on rational mind rather than this deep undercurrent of intuition and imagination that was so alive within me. So in a way, my path in meditation, in Engaged Buddhism, and my journey writing this book is part of a healing also for that young person who noticed the harm caused within and out by a tendency towards sunshining. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very, very, very powerful. You said something that really brought to mind a reality that I think that this way of living requires us to not uh, push away evil and to say that no, we are responsible for the world that we are found in. And we are responsible for creating another world. But really, it's not even about creating another world, but moving things around to reveal the world that is already emerging. Um,
Yes.
and I think that's I mean, that was really the consciousness behind this series, was to say, let's gather folks together who are doing that, who are redecorating the world, who are redecorating their souls and their life and their love and their way of working and their way of being. And all of this, like moving things around in this hustle and bustle. I like to say that that's what hope is, that, all of this moving and this juggling and this imagining and this loving and this fearing and all that stuff, all of that, when it happens, all that stuff, when it happens, that's what it means to be hopeful, and to do hopeful things, is to question and to imagine and to confront, intervene. The great prophet of the 20th century, Rabbi Abraham Heschel, said that the role of the prophet is to interfere. And I think in a lot of ways, it's to interfere with this idea that we need to bypass difficult things. And the sad thing, what you alluded to in the beginning, around those of us who practice meditation, but not just meditators, a lot of us in the mainstream spiritual world have really influenced this idea of spiritual bypass. Like, oh, you can get rid of all of these negative ideas or these negative things or the evil of climate change and corruption and sexism and patriarchy by just sitting on your cushion and meditating on good thoughts, practicing affirmations and all that stuff. And those are good things. But when they are done with an erroneous consciousness that all of that's bad and it'll all go away if we just ignore it, it's not going to work. And in fact, it will cause more suffering of yourself and those around you. So I think really your book is an opportunity to be empowered in accepting our responsibility and making this life um, a beautiful one and actualizing the beauty that's already there.
Yes, yes. And I want to emphasize that last line that you shared, actualizing the beauty that's already there. One of the messages in the book is about the invitation and the responsibility we have in this time, as you're pointing to go beyond binary perception, hierarchical perception, labeling and categorizing life in ways we have for too long, and to remember how to see clearly from the heart,
Mhm.
from presence, from the integration of body mind. There's an ability to see what is and to recognize the wholeness that is already here right now, to recognize the true nature that is already within and expressing through each of us right now and in one another, to recognize it right now. And I sense that so much of the suffering of our world today comes from this lack of clear seeing, and instead habit of seeing through the conditioned patterning of this is good, this is bad, this is better, this is worse, this is wanted, this is unwanted, um, rather than seeing what is as it is and recognizing wholeness in the moment that already exists. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, one of the things I talk about, my weekly meditation group is called Remembering the
Mhm.
Already Awakened State. Not that we have to cultivate a new awakened state or make a whole bunch of changes in ourselves to attain some expression of enlightenment that the very few can. But remember, the already awakened awareness is already awake. It's this
Mhm.
backdrop of consciousness that's here in every single moment. It never leaves us, ever, but we regularly leave it. And so we're learning how to reclaim, how to relax down into, it's interesting because it's such a deep field of belonging. And there's so much, I think, fear of risking belonging because so many people have learned how to kind of survive and develop survival strategies for a conditionally loving world instead. That many
Mm.
people have kind of forgotten that experience of just surrendering into belonging to ourselves, belonging to the earth, belonging to one another. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mm. Mm. I love that. That's really worth meditating on of the risk of belonging and can we belong to ourselves? And because I think that also gets to another area that darkness for some people and they interpret darkness as a a lacking of loving themselves and wanting to be with themselves. And I think that influences a lot of our negative behaviors. I was just with this past at the beginning of this week. Every week I have a therapy session as a revolutionary act of saying that I want to care for myself in a world where I'm told not to care for myself.
Yep,
and
yep.
there was a couple of things that kind of came up in that conversation, and I'm going to use this as a way of kind of wrapping our conversation up. Is that my therapist really named or encouraged me to name the fact that I am being forced to confront a lot of my fears that I didn't think that I had or that I resolved already, and also too one of those being this idea that as a priest one of the I do a lot of different things, but one of those things is that I'm oftentimes called to preach a word of faith and hope in the midst of different communities who are yearning for something to hold on to as we are being pulled through this experience that we are going through in life. And I was telling him that if I have any fear, one of those fears is that I'm not able to proclaim a word of faith because I'm too caught up in my own struggle of what it means to believe. And in reflecting upon that this week, one of the things that I have come to believe deeply, and I'm writing a memoir, and so that's one of the things that I'm writing about in this book is that um, I really have found that believing is not real. It's not a real experiment if it doesn't include doubt. Um, and it doesn't include the reality of, I don't have an answer for that. And maybe I'm not supposed to have an answer for that. Maybe I just need to go through it. And maybe you do too. And maybe that's the word of faith or the word of hope that can be proclaimed and shared with folks. The other element to that also that you alluded to, which I reference a lot in my preaching and my teachings and my counseling, is that the power of remembering, of bringing back to mind um, what it is that we know. I sometimes tell people, I don't know if I was born into this realm as a reincarnation or what, but I do know that I came here knowing something, and somewhere along the line, what I my spirit knew and my internal mind was replaced with what I was supposed to know um, by the world. And that supposed to know is in air quotes because that really was indoctrination. And I have forgotten what it is that my spirit has always known, which is eternal. Um, and so reclaiming and remembering, I think, is an active um, practice of allowing your internal life to be the guide, to be what gives you wisdom and insight. And part of doing that is scary and saying, I have fear around that. Um, and can I sit with it and be belong to it and not shy away from it and not look upon the different elements of my life as something to be ashamed of or afraid of, but rather to be something to hold tenderly and to learn, as Tai, our beloved teacher, would say, be like a lotus that blooms in the sea of fire, um, and not fear being burned up. And yeah, so I'm going to give you the microphone to offer some final thoughts. Where can people connect with you? Where can they get the book? All that kind of stuff. And then we will close out with a blessing.
Thank you. First, I just want to pause and that phrase you shared to be, say it again, be the,
To be a lotus blooming in a sea of fire.
thank you. It's been a long day so far. And I love that quote. And just want to underline for listeners that while at first it can feel scary to turn towards and be with, to welcome what we've been taught to judge or feel shame about or reject, uh, the more we begin to, with compassion, turn towards rather than away, and this includes turn towards our collective unconscious biases that need to be healed, turn towards our shadows, each time we recognize our profound resilience and courage and the already existing love of true nature, of who and what we really are. So we literally activate true nature by being willing to spend time in the dark, by being willing to include into our circle of acceptance that which we have pushed away. The only thing, when I think about people's conventional definition of darkness as kind of bad or scary, that feels scary to me is pushing something away into an isolated dungeon or closet of aloneness. Practice is about waking up to the field of interconnection and recognizing that whatever we invite into that field and give spaciousness to and presence and inquiry to we invite into self-healing. We allow that, whatever it is, whatever emotion, whatever habit pattern, to reveal itself to us, to unfurl, to ask for and receive the healing needed. And this is so, so important. We are so much more resilient and courageous and full of love than we've been taught through the indoctrination you mentioned. And so one of the ways I talk about this in the book and as a teacher is the invitation to reclaim the authority of our heart.
Mm.
And this means acknowledging the ways we've been conditioned to project authority onto externals, onto others. That leader, that teacher must know, but I don't have the same innate connection with the divine. Or onto the conditioned mind itself, thinking our conditioned thoughts are authority, and they are not. So really this invitation to reclaim the authority of the heart. I've so enjoyed this conversation with you today. And for listeners, you're welcome to visit my website, which is deborahEdenTull.com, my full name. You can find me on social media through Mindful Living Revolution, my nonprofit. There are all kinds of offerings, retreats. We meet both in person now and remotely. There's a monthly Luminous Darkness offering that begins in January, as well as some other immersions that will be held next year. It's been so rich to recognize and hear how touched people are from this topic, and how many people recognize the medicine of darkness and haven't quite had it be named before in this way. And I believe there are a whole collective of people out there waking up to the medicine of darkness, and as we've talked about today, the sacred interplay of light and dark. So thank you for listening, folks, and thank you so much for this conversation.
It's been a delight and a joy and a wonderful experience. And I have to affirm this phrase that you use of the reclaiming the authority of the heart. That echoes a lot with me. And I'm definitely going to use that in my meditation. In my therapy session, my previous therapy session, I said to my therapist that in my meditation, I heard a word that I thought was interesting. It was a phrase that said, I need to learn to trust my heart as much as I trust my trauma. And I think that's really echoes with what you said of learning to reclaim the authority of your heart. And so I find that just so good. And I agree. I think that darkness is very much healing medicine, just as much as light is. And there are times when we need to have it. So I really encourage people, get the book. You will find it to be very empowering, and healing medicine in its own way. And it'll give you also different insights and maybe confirmations for experiences and insights that you have had too along your journey, and connect. And I definitely am signing up for your meditation group. So I will put links to all of that kind of stuff in the description below. And as always, dear friends, remember that life is short and we do not have much time to gladden the hearts of those who journey with us. So let us be swift to love, make haste to be kind, and wherever you are, be not afraid to embark upon the dark. Amen. Thank you.